Welcome to the Thought Leaders Talk. But no further ado, please do welcome Risto Siilasmaa.
So good afternoon. It's great to be back. This is my place. I entered into TKK, the University of Technology of Helsinki, with great hopes. I believed that I would be entering into a place where I would get individual attention from people who know everything about the topics that I want to learn more about, and they really want me to learn. And boy, was I disappointed. But now, having followed how Aalto University has evolved, this is a different place. And Aalto University has gone into a great direction with a much more experimental approach, with thinking of the students as customers, as stakeholders, not as cattle, as it used to be. And actually caring much more what you learn and what you understand. So I'm really happy to be here because I truly respect the work that has been done in Aalto. When I think about who am I always come to the same conclusion that above anything else, I'm an entrepreneur. And for me, entrepreneurship is a way of life. It's not a job, it's not a title, it's not a profession, it's a way of thinking, it's a philosophy. And at the core of entrepreneurship, there's the sense of ownership. And you shouldn't misunderstand me. This is not about shareholding. This is not about money. This is not about power. This is about the sense of responsibility. When you feel ownership about something, you feel responsible for that something. And that sense of responsibility makes you do things. It makes you react. When there's a risk towards the thing that you feel ownership for, you feel a compulsion to do something about that. You constantly think, how can you make that object of your sense of responsibility better? Because you want to be proud of it. You want to be proud of the company that you work for. You want to make sure that it succeeds. You also worry what bad things could happen to it. And all that starts from the sense of ownership. So for me, entrepreneurship is above anything else a sense of ownership. And we all can feel a sense of ownership. Any professor here can feel a sense of ownership, not just for his or her subject, students, but actually for the whole university. And when you feel a sense of ownership for the Aalto University, every time you see something that is wrong with the university, you feel an urge to do something about that. And that is at the core of entrepreneurship. So when I had the opportunity to join the board of Nokia, I was thrilled. And I wanted to take that sense of ownership with me. And I was a bit scared because Nokia is and was an icon. Nokia has been in wood and pulp, has been in cable industry, has been in rubber industry. All Finns have Nokia rubber boots somewhere in their closet. Our parents have wiped their behinds with Nokia tissue paper, toilet paper. Nokia has been part of our lives for a very long time. We have felt proud of it, we have despaired about it. It has given us pride in being a Finn. For example, in FSecure, in the early days when we still did paper brochures for the company, and at the back page I listed the offices of FSecure, I always hid the Helsinki office somewhere in the middle, hoping that people wouldn't notice. And I put the San Jose office first, hoping that people would mistake us for a Silicon Valley company. I was ashamed of being a Finnish technology entrepreneur. I tried to hide it because back in those days it was not a merit. Nobody knew any Finnish high-tech companies in the early 90s. And Nokia changed all that for me. Nokia gave me pride of being a Finnish entrepreneur and a Finnish technology entrepreneur, and that was hugely meaningful for me. So I started my corporate presentations with a slide about Finland, as opposed to trying to hide the fact and fool people to think that we are actually an American company. Nokia, at its best, had or generated 4% of Finnish GDP. It accounted for 50% of all Finnish corporate R&D spending. So every single other Finnish company altogether spent as much as Nokia. And Nokia accounted for 25% of all Finnish exports, a single company, and 80% of all corporate profits in Finland. All other companies combined were 1/4 of Nokia's profits. Think about that. A really, really big duck in a very, very small pond. And that is tough. When that duck becomes the world dominant player in the sexy mobile handset market that is in the spotlight of everybody's attention, it generates such attention on the company and its leadership that the toxic effects of success are exaggerated. You know all the Chinese or supposedly Chinese curse that may you live in interesting times. A better curse might be that may you become hugely successful. Because that is hard to manage. It's hard to believe how difficult it can be to become hugely successful because people behave differently towards you. People treat you differently, they look at you differently, and it changes you. You will become a different you. And a company that is lifted on a pedestal changes, its culture changes. And that is difficult to deal in the United States, where you have a lot of other companies that are equally successful and equally global and equally gigantic. But it's much more difficult to deal with when you are in Finland and your profits are 4 times what everybody else together is making in the country. So I joined the Nokia board of directors in 2008, and by the time I became chairman in 2012, the company had fallen from its peak of success. So immediately as I joined the board, we started going down and fast. And by 2012, in the first quarter, our revenues declined by 40% from the previous year. 40%. In the second quarter, our handset revenues declined by 26% from the previous year. During those first 2 quarters, we issued 2 profit warnings. Our core investors didn't want to talk to us. So long-only funds that we wanted to have as shareholders refused to meet with us because they said that we can't imagine a situation where we would be interested in considering investing in your share. The press started speculating on the timing of the Nokia bankruptcy. Not if, but when. We were constantly laying off people. The press was talking about not just about our impending bankruptcy, but all these other failures, the dropping revenues, the losses we posted, the layoffs, our employees were reading those news. It was really hard to be motivated. And of course, we were planning the biggest round of layoffs in the company's history to be announced in June. I started as chairman in May. Our share price had sunk so low that in July, the value of all our businesses combined was 1.5 billion euros. So you could basically, at that share price, buy all of Nokia, all of its businesses, for 1.5 billion euros. And just our patent portfolio alone was much, much more valuable than the whole company. So it meant that some other parts of our business were valued at such a large negative value that when you added all the parts together, you ended up at 1.5 billion. And when you have this really big duck that everybody is looking at in this very small pond, and then you become chairman of that company, it is a bit of a scary thing. But you know that entrepreneurs are people who, when they see a risk somewhere, they immediately take it. That's one definition of an entrepreneur. But I was thrilled about the opportunity to work with the great people that we had in the company. And that may sound weird. A company who is clearly failing starts as the dominant player in the smartphone market. Symbian had at its peak 71% of the smartphone market. Company that starts there and then loses the game. And then I still say that we had great people working in the company. That may sound like a contradiction, but it is a fact. And that just shows the importance of the way of working, the culture. You can have great individuals, but if they don't work well in a team, they don't share the same ways of working that I will talk more about in a moment, you can have really poor results. So what did I do when I had this opportunity to become the chairman? The first thing that I later learned that I did right was that I did nothing. I started thinking about, not about the fixes to the problems, but I started thinking about what could I do to create an environment where the team could be more effective in fixing the issues. When you see fires all around you, the natural instinct is to go and put them out. Take out the water hose and start spraying water. But instead I learned that it's more important to think about sort of a one layer higher in the ladder of abstractions. And think about, okay, there are fires here, I can put them out, but they will just be new fires. And I'll be putting them out all along. What can I do that there wouldn't be new fires? What can I do that all of us, all the people, would behave in a way that new fires wouldn't start and the old fires would be efficiently put out? And that you can apply in almost any role. So when you take on a new role, think about how do I create an environment where we can all be successful. And then you can start thinking about the pragmatic things to do. But long story short, if we fast forward 4 years, we were a transformed company. Our enterprise value had grown more than 20x in 4 years. And out of our 100,000 plus employees, less than 1% carried a Nokia badge 4 years earlier. So from the people perspective, from the business perspective, from the value perspective, we were a company transformed. I was on a panel in China together with the founders of Tencent, Baidu, and Alibaba. And these three Chinese superstars were looking at me like, who the heck is this and what is he doing here with us? Nokia, I mean, that's an ancient company. And when I had my turn to introduce myself, I told them that Nokia is the youngest company on this panel, because we are less than 4 years old. But we are also the oldest company, because we are 151 years old. We are both of those, and both are important. The long history of the company actually gave us strength during the transformation. Nokia has gone through so much. It has done so much. It has been on the brink of bankruptcy many times, and it has always survived. And that history, it provides you with faith that as we have done it before, we will do it again. And it also makes you feel accountable in a different way, that we will not let this company fail on our watch. We will pass this company to the next generation in a good shape. And we had shown people that we can transform. And the Chinese entrepreneurs understood that. Chinese understand the value of history. They have loads of it. But they also understand agility and the ability to take risks. So the interesting question is, what led to the crisis in the first place? And how do you survive? How do you transform? And I have tried to describe many of the dynamics that led to that crisis in my book, which I largely wrote so that I would learn myself. Because the best way to learn is to teach others. Because if you try to teach others, you have to understand the fundamental core of the topic that you are talking about. And if you write a book, you are sort of teaching others, and first you need to learn yourself. So a couple things that led to the fall of Nokia. The first one is the almost impossible power of disruption and the impossibility of defending against a disruption. And that is a bit hard to understand, but try to imagine a company that is so powerful that its customers feel that it's not selling to them anymore, it's just allocating supply. So we didn't have salespeople, that is what some of our operator customers said. We didn't have salespeople because the demand was higher than our supply. So we had salespeople who told to some customers that you won't get what you want, but I can give you this much. But to you, I'll give you what you want. And the customers, of course, don't like that. And we did things that customers felt that we were arrogant. And then when we want to change the way we do business, those customers are not very eager to allow us to change. They don't want us to make changes that are not in their favor. So for example, if we wanted to change the user interface of a mobile experience to one where the application doesn't ask the user's permission to generate network costs, the operators say that we'll get lots of support calls when people get their invoice and there are lots of costs, and the application has not told them that it may generate costs. So if you remove those warnings, we will stop buying from you. We will put you into the penalty box. And if we wanted to create the Nokia Club, which creates a direct connection between Nokia and end consumers, the operator said that you are trying to go around us. and form a direct relationship with our customers. They are our consumers. If you do that, we'll punish you. And so forth and so forth. When Apple came, they didn't have a single operator customer. They didn't have a single contract. They didn't have any shared processes. There were no expectations from the operators. There was nothing the operators could punish Apple with. So Apple could say that this is our model. Our applications won't ask the end users anything. We try to make the user experience as simple as possible, as straightforward as possible. If you don't like our approach, so be it. We'll work with your competitor. Negotiating with Apple on their contract it didn't exist. It was non-existent. There was no negotiation. It was take it or leave it. And the operators couldn't really, they didn't have any negotiating power in that relationship. With Nokia, they had lots of power. So it is really difficult for an incumbent to completely change their business model with their customers. Externally, it might seem obvious that, hey, you need to change this and this and this. Within the company, it seemed really difficult. And as the company was doing well for such a long time, there was no huge pressure to change these things. There were a lot of stupid things that people observed, but clearly they didn't matter because the company was still hugely successful, hugely profitable, continuously growing. So those stupid things were allowed to stay. And this is a reminder for all of you who work in business and you see stupid things in the way you do business. Change them now. Don't wait until tomorrow. Even if you can survive and you can be successful as things are today, don't tolerate stupid aspects of your relationships. Fix them, change them. There's a disruption coming. Somebody else will fix all those problems at one go, and it will be very difficult for you to do it. When you are doing well, you could afford to do a lot of things. But when the disruption has happened and you have a competitor who has a superior offering to the customers, your profitability is going down, your revenues are going down, you can't afford to make those changes anymore. At least it will be 10 times more difficult. So these technology disruptions are really difficult to prevent, also because customers often don't know what they will want. So if you asked back then from consumers, do you want a touch device? A very small fraction of all consumers said that, yes, I want a touch device. The vast majority said that, no, I don't like that. And that's why Nokia believed very long that you need a numeric keyboard, because some customers prefer that. You need maybe some touch devices, you need a full QWERTY keyboard, you need different form factors for different people. And nobody believed back then that in 6 years' time, everybody would have a black rectangle, which is only a display. Nokia had a touch device operating system already in 2004, Symbian Series 90. It was discontinued. There was felt that there's no demand for it. When in 2006 a group of upcoming Nokia leaders were asked to predict what would be the next things that Nokia would miss, the number one thing that they listed was an iPod with a radio, which is basically iPhone. iPhone is an iPod with a radio. So Nokia invented, or was one of the first ones with touch phones. It did predict that touch phones would make it big. It did predict that Apple would be a disruptive force. Nokia invented the App Store. And despite all this, and despite having a far superior market share, it turned out to be impossible for the company to prevent the disruption. Part of this is because of the toxicity of success, because of the rigidity of the culture. Bad news didn't flow up. People in the leadership didn't know what people down in the organization knew. And you can identify some of these problems by asking 3 questions. And this applies to basically all teams. The first question is, are we spending our time on the right topics? So you can ask that in a board or a management team. Really looking at how much do we spend time on the various things we do? Are these in the right priority order? How much do we spend time on strategy? How much do we talk about our competition? How much do we think about the key technology decisions? Or are those delegated to somewhere down in the organization? Does the management team mostly focus on financials and press and analysts? Or do they focus on things that are forward-looking, predicting what the competition will do, thinking about what will be the winning technologies for the future, thinking about how will our customers' requirements change? The second thing that you can ask yourself is, are we focused on the right topics the right way? So do we have a strong element of trust in the team? Do people dare to say what they really think? Have people been punished for bringing up bad news? And we know that people learn really quickly. When you come to your boss or boss's boss with bad news and he shouts at you, you don't look forward to doing it the second time. But it's really hard being the leader to thank somebody from the bottom of your heart when they come to tell you what you really don't want to hear. But that's the burden of leadership, because bad news are good news. And how do you make people believe that? So one of my favorite sayings is that bad news is good news is no news, and no news is really, really bad news. And if you don't get news, then you know that there's something fundamentally wrong. And that links to my favorite philosophy, which is paranoid optimism. I stumbled somehow onto this concept maybe 10 years ago, and I understood that it describes so well how I think. Because I always end up thinking, but okay, what could our competition do that would really hurt us? And imagining different types of futures. And how do we prevent those bad futures from happening? It's easy to imagine great futures, positive futures. That's what we all can do. And you can plan how do you accomplish those. But you also need to balance that out with imagining what could go wrong and how do I prevent that. And once you have done that, you'll have a much better chance of being successful. And you can actually genuinely feel more optimistic about the future. Because we understand what can happen. The good, the bad. We will prevent the bad, we have action plans. We will create the good. We know how to do that. And then you are also better prepared for surprises. Because you have sort of mapped the various scenarios that might happen. You're not just limited to the one plan that you hope would happen, and which statistically is very unlikely to happen. Because things change, the world is unpredictable. I like to think of that as standing on the top of a hill and looking forward in the darkness, in the darkest night, and there's one lit path across the valley, and that's your plan. But otherwise it's just blackness. But if you do scenario planning, you are a paranoid optimist. You imagine several different futures, or you several paths crossing the darkness. And even if you know that you very likely will not walk down any of those paths exactly, you have an overview of the terrain, of the landscape, because many of those paths, or those paths crisscross the landscape in such a way that you know that there's a cliff, there's a river, there's a pond, and you don't just see the one lit path in front of you. So I very much believe in scenario planning as a great tool for all sorts of teams to think about the very long-term future, but also some short-term decisions. Let's say you have a plan to enter a new market, something as pragmatic as that. And you can imagine several different ways how the existing competition in that market will react. And then you can play war games in your mind. What shall I do if they do this? What shall I do if they do that? How much am I willing to invest? When will I withdraw? How do I increase the likelihood of being successful? How do I decrease the likelihood of failing? So you can apply that model into very commonplace decisions and plans. And at the core of all this, in my opinion, is entrepreneurship. And you can teach entrepreneurship to others, and the best way to teach is to act yourself, and people will follow. Lead from the front, show an example. But also explain what you want from others. Be very clear on what kind of a culture you want, what kind of behavior you appreciate. For example, just saying bad news is good news, that's important. Then you have communicated that you really want to hear bad news early. But then you need to live accordingly. So when somebody comes to you with those bad news, you need to respect them for that and thank them for that. And if you do that consistently, then behavior starts to change. And then that will flow downwards in the organization. And slowly the culture will change. Starts with the statement, continues with your own behavior, and then starts spreading from there. But you need to then expect that and demand that same behavior from others. I think I have talked long enough. I'd really like to continue with the dialogue with you, and apparently there will be a microphone here. I'm fine with you shouting whatever you want to ask or comment, and I can repeat that comment or question if that's more comfortable. I think there was the first hand over there. Am I using time management and... Sorry, I still didn't get it. Life coaching. I have been a coach many times to others. I actually have never had a mentor myself. But it's just like what I talked about writing a book. It's the best way to learn, to teach others. Actually, mentoring others is a great way to learn yourself. But it would be a good idea to have a coach or a mentor. I'd like to do that, but I haven't done it. Time management, I'm probably not great at that either, I must admit. I tend to get everything done in the end, but the order in which I do things is not necessarily the best possible one. but I'm trying. I try to be systematic with a lot of tools on my iPad, but definitely could be better.
So, sorry, if you have any questions, raise your hand and maybe even come a little bit closer to me. I can give you the microphone. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Hello. Recently, there had been an explosion in digital and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum and so on. So do you see some disruption in near future regarding mobile phone or in related areas in connection?
Well, I definitely believe that paying is changing. It's becoming digital and it's becoming mobile. And Apple Pay is an easy example here in Finland, but if you want to experience how that really works, you need to go to China. And China is far ahead of any Western market in mobile payments. People really don't have cash anymore. They don't really need cash. And WeChat is a great platform and a great example of how easy life can be using digital money. Cryptocurrencies then it's a technology. It's a fad. I don't like technology fads as such. They are a little bit dangerous. I haven't invested in cryptocurrencies. I have friends who have made a lot of money in cryptocurrencies and then they have lost much of that again. The technology itself and blockchains overall are really good technologies for certain purposes, but we shouldn't become religious about technology. And I do believe that we need to have central banks starting to exercise some level of oversight over these digital currencies.
Thanks a lot, Risto, for your presentation. My name is Verena Rentrop, and we recently had a quick interaction in LinkedIn where I raised your awareness that there's a beautiful group of over 27,000 ex-Nokians in Facebook. It's a group called Beyond Nokia. And I remember you responded that you are not in Facebook, but if you would be joining. And I know a lot of people from the Beyond Nokia group are in the audience. So either convince Risto to join us, or the alternative is there's a beautiful blog called nokiapeople.com. And I would love if you could publish a Nokia People story. Thanks a lot, Risto.
Well, we have a deal. Not on Facebook, about the blog. I won't become active in Facebook. That's a decision I have made. But let me just say that a key sign of a great company is how committed people stay to the company after they leave it. And I think that's one of the key metrics of a company's true success. What kind of a mark the company leaves in the hearts of the people who work there. And Nokia definitely has done that. And it should be a guiding light for all of us in the company to think about all of our employees, not just about their career, but what happens after they leave Nokia and how we treat them, how will they feel afterwards. And it's a hugely powerful group of people, because they go and work in another company, that can become our customer, it can become our partner. These people can talk against us or for us. And I think Nokia has been blessed with great people working in the company and great people who have worked for the company. And somehow, despite all these challenges, that relationship has stayed a strong one. So we all bleed Nokia blue.
Hi, my name is Antti Merilehto, and asking your advice on, because we're on a very different phases of our working lives. In the Paranoid Optimist Transforming Nokia book, you beautifully describe when you joined the Nokia board as a junior member, and perhaps you realized that the emperor doesn't have any clothes. In the situation when some of us, when we join, whether it's board or another community, and you start to realize that people are following a path that led to greatness once, but aren't doing it anymore. What's your advice?
Well, first of all, it took me a very long time. I completely felt out of my depth in the Nokia board. It was more global, it was so much bigger, it was so much more complicated than any business that I had ever done. And then we had the financial crisis in the first year of my staying on the Nokia board. So everything was changing. You never knew what was the root cause for the change. Was it the financial crisis? Was it the new competition? Was it something that the company was doing? So the key thing under such circumstances is to think or ask yourself, do we have an open atmosphere for discussion in the team that you belong to? Because then you can start making sense out of things. If you lack that openness, that ability to question and challenge, and then get data, get answers to the questions, real answers, where the person digging up the data really wants to understand him or herself also what is happening. If you don't have that sense, then you need to do something about it. It's your duty. And it's not easy to figure out what you can do, because it might be that somebody else or some larger number of people might be really unhappy about you shaking the boat. But then you just need to think about your real duty. And actually you are helping everybody if you find the right way to challenge the status quo. But it's so difficult. It's so difficult to make sure that there is a fundamental problem. Maybe I'm wrong. These guys, they have done this for a long time and they have been so successful. It's highly unlikely that they would be wrong. It's highly likely that I am wrong. So how do you get through that? There's no easy recipe for that.
Okay. Can you a little bit clarify the issue that why Apple could say the operators that get or let it be? Why Nokia can't do that or cannot do that?
Well, Nokia could have done it, yes, but it just was very, very, very difficult because the operators held so much leverage over Nokia. They had so much power to punish Nokia. And the operators didn't feel any force pressuring them to change. When Apple arrived, they didn't have any operator customers. The first customer that they got was AT&T in the United States. They made an exclusive deal with AT&T. And that, by the way, meant that Verizon, the other giant in the United States, they were left out. So what did they do? They started supporting Android because they needed something. Nokia was almost non-existent in the United States. Symbian was not going anywhere. So the reason why Android became so successful was largely because Verizon backed them in the first place. They gave them the shove to start gaining momentum. And AT&T, of course, was hugely successful with the iPhone. And operators around the world wanted to take a piece of that apple. And Apple just told them that this is our way, take it or leave it. And they did it beautifully. And at that time, Nokia was going down so quickly that the idea of then starting a rebellion against our key customers, it was much, much more difficult to contemplate than it was earlier. But earlier, we were doing fine. So why take the pain? So in hindsight, the world is such an understandable place, and events, the sequences of events are so understandable. But when you are in the middle of it, it's not clear at all. And that's where scenario planning can help you.
Hi. What's the most important aspect or issue that you're spending your time now?
The most important issue, well, of course, in our current business in Nokia, 5G is a major issue. 5G is a very complicated new technology that is being introduced at different times in different places in the world, and there's a huge competition on who will get how much market share and what is going to happen, and lots of old and new competitors. So it's a very exciting puzzle to piece together. But then we also need to be thinking about what's coming after that, and how do we increase our competitiveness across everything. And machine learning is one aspect of that, one of the key technologies, and one of my hobbies as well. So from the personal development point of view, I'm spending time on machine learning and learning the Chinese language. Those are my two areas of personal development. Then company-wise, of course, 5G, the strategy of the company. No, those two are the most important things.
Oh, hey, Chris, hey, Risto.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of what you're doing with Nokia FSecure, and also, so I was thinking about like Nokia was practically Finnish economy, right? So like back then when Nokia went down, the Finnish economy went down really hard as well. So that happens like to one country, right? Like Finland and like Taiwan has the same company. They have like Foxconn, also quite similar. So after that, like, so I think it's good, like, if Nokia can become like a foundational technology company, like Intel or IBM in Silicon Valley. So, like, what have you been doing to, like, help startups after the experience with Nokia downfall? And also, the second point is that I remember in 2014 when you sold the Nokia mobile department to Microsoft. That was a beautiful deal, by the way. It was like there's a clause that says like you cannot enter directly back into the mobile market for 7 years. So that means in 2021 you can, like you can enter back into the mobile market. So like, do you guys are you guys planning to go back to the mobile handheld device? Thanks.
Well, first of all, I think Nokia's collapse was probably a blessing for Finland. No area was Salo, I was going to say that no city was dealt a worse hand than Oulu, but actually Salo was probably hit harder. But both Salo and especially Oulu have become very entrepreneurial cities, and lots of new companies being established, and quite a lot of foreign investments as well. Companies coming after the talent that left Nokia. And great innovative solutions and businesses being established. Nokia, of course, was spending a lot of money helping those companies get started, and old Nokia employees becoming entrepreneurs. We had the Bridge program, which was really something that I'm quite proud of, because it was a new way of dealing with that type of a difficult situation. We really rethought how a company could help its people under those circumstances, and it worked well. If Nokia had stayed on top of the mobile handset business, I think Finland might be worse off today. And it's actually interesting to think about it. If in 2008, when Apple was already in the market, they launched in 2007. If I think now back, what could Nokia have done back then that would have kept Nokia competitive in the business? There's only one thing that I can think of. And it would have been that we would have strongly backed Android, become the strongest Android player, basically becoming what Samsung became. But for Samsung back then it was just another platform, because they didn't have their own platform at all. They were using Symbian, they were using anything that was available. For Nokia, such a decision would have been really, really difficult, because we had Symbian, which was by far the most popular platform in the world, and we were working on MeeGo, which was supposed to become the next dominant platform for the next decade. So how could we have then decided that, hey, neither one of these will work? We'll just throw both of them into the trash can, and we'll put a lot of money behind Android, which will be launched by Google. Google in mobile handsets. I mean, who are they? Why would we trust them? Why would we put our future, hopes on their shoulders? And they will launch it in a few months. Will it even be good? It's an unknown quantity. But if we had done that, then we could have become something like Samsung. But we might be worse off today having done that, because the margins in the handset business are razor thin. It's a cutthroat business. Not saying that our current business would be at all easy. It's actually very, very difficult. And in many ways it's not a wonderful business either. But it could well be that even if we had done the only thing which would have been impossible for us at that time, but even in hindsight, we might be worse off today. So I think the lesson is that no matter what you do, you can make something good out of it. It's like you thinking, some of the younger people here, thinking about what career shall I pick? And the point is that you could almost pick any career. You'll find something exciting, something difficult, something challenging, something fun in almost anything. And for a company as well, the most important thing is to decide where you want to go and then go instead of just staying put and thinking about it.
Good evening, I'm Teemu Polo. I'd like to return the discussion on your book and the board of practices and stuff around that. I know that you have experiences from boards large and small, and I'd like to hear your kind of ideas and thoughts about the commonalities and the differences between the startup boards and the large ones. Because of course, as we all know, there's a lot of books and research done about the large ones, but then on the early parts of that journey, say startup and growth phase is a bit different.
Well, for a startup, a board can be a bouncing board. It can be somebody who dares to challenge the entrepreneur, the CEO of the company, who doesn't necessarily get challenged enough by his or her colleagues. The board can be a team of people with whom the CEO can reveal his or her insecurities. The CEO often stands on a pedestal, and people look at him or her as somebody who knows the answers and who's supposed to know the answers and who understands everything. And people get sort of captured by those expectations. And then the CEO starts behaving as if he or she knew everything and had all the answers. And that's really, really dangerous. But perhaps with the board, you can be a little bit more honest. And if you are not, then a good board will shake you and remind you that you don't know everything. You need to be able to learn new things. You need to be able to ask stupid questions. And you need to be able to take a challenge from people close to you. After the tech bubble burst in around 2003, I had a really meaningful experience where I started questioning my abilities to steer FSecure as FSecure's CEO. Because I had only experienced growth. I was hiring people, we were entering new markets, we were breaking new revenue records, our profits were increasing, we went public, the share price went through the roof, And then suddenly I was laying off people, our revenues were dropping, we were losing money. And I started questioning that this is all my fault. Can I do this? And of course I didn't tell anybody anything about these doubts. I had all the answers, and I was, showing the direction, and for the board I created great plans how we'll fix this, but inside I was doubting myself. And then one day I went and talked to the chairman and another board member, and I told them, hey, I don't think I can do this. I think you should choose another CEO. And they were kind and wise enough to tell me that, hey, Risto, sit down, let's talk about this. Let's look at it from all angles, let's think about what's best for the company. And in the end, they convinced me that I was the right person to continue. And they helped me figure out what to do, basically by just telling me that we trust you. We know you can do it. And that was a transformational moment for me, because it led to us figuring out what to do. And the company started growing again and became profitable, increasingly profitable. And when I left the company in 2006 as CEO, I left as a winner. If I had left in 2003, I would have left as a loser. And for me, the board was the difference between being a loser and a winner. So that's a very personal example of what the board did for me. But there's many other things a board can do.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I'm Kazmi, and I have a question related to one thing in your book. You said that the function of the board is to make sure that the company succeeds, apart from hiring or firing the CEO. So how would you choose the board? Because I guess the question is pretty much related to what the gentleman said. So how would you choose the board? In this changing world, let's say there's a startup and it's a hardware startup even more. So do you see academics, let's say professors of universities on the board, can they really strike the reality in front of the CEO? How would you choose the board if you were, let's say, 20-year-old today?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is about team dynamics. A board is a team like any other team, and we all can study about good team dynamics, how to put together a good team, about the right type of diversity, the right culture, the right ways of working. So for me, when I interview potential board members, the first thing that I try to understand is sort of the values of that person. I often ask them to tell me who they are, who are you, and how did you become who you are. And I'm interested in hearing how they define themselves. If they just list their CV, then that's a very superficial definition of the human being. If they start talking about their parents and how they were raised and what values did they learn from their parents, that at least tells me that they are more open and they maybe have reflected a little bit on who they are. And it's so important that the values are the same, being curious, being a learning addict, being steadfast in the face of adversity, i.e. being courageous to say what you really think, and never becoming silent because they are afraid that they would be wrong or foolish or opposed by somebody. I want people who speak their minds, but then I also want people who have different backgrounds. So we do all sorts of tables where we categorize the knowledge and capabilities and backgrounds that we have on the board, reflecting those against what we believe the company will face in the future. What kind of businesses, in which countries, in what kind of environments, what kind of competitive dynamics we face, what kind of expertise and capabilities we want on the board. And that can help, but in the end it's about selecting people, individuals, who then need to work together. And we have golden rules that we created for the Nokia board, which help in communicating to potential new board members how we want them to work. Not what we want them to do, but how we expect them to work. And if they feel uncomfortable with some of that, then hopefully they will tell us and we will not pick them. And they shouldn't come. If they feel comfortable with those statements, then we are one step closer to having them meld into the team. But in the end, recruiting is always about the individual.
All right. So in the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about describing when Nokia was having the decline with the business and it really, heading to the troubles. So the top position leaders did not know what the people on the lower level knew. So what extent, your personal opinion, so what extent you think that the top management really should know what's going on the lower level of the, let's say, in middle management or even the lower level, if you talk about the organization? Mm-hmm. And also how to get that information going upwards in the organization, or is there any way to do it?
If you can trust that you will be told what you need to know, then there's little need to go and dig for bad news. But then how do you really know whether people are ready to tell you when they have concerns? I think a key part is documenting how you want people to behave and communicating that. And then you can also try to measure that. You can ask in employee surveys, for example, how easy it is for you to go to your boss and talk about something negative. And if it's an anonymous survey, people should be able to give honest feedback in that. And you can see where does the company stand overall, where do different business groups stand, where do teams in particular countries stand, and hopefully at least you can see a change, whether it goes in a better direction or a worse direction. So I believe that you can measure almost everything and anything. And if you decide what you want, you can figure out a question to test where you are, and then you can measure how you move. But the key thing is that I think the top management should often stop to think about what is really relevant for us right now. What should we spend time on? And they should take deep dives in key topics, and they definitely should make sure that people dare to come to tell them what is broken. And you can come up with hugely impactful tools to get that done if you just set your mind to it.
Okay, so because we're running out of time, not yet, so we have 5 more questions in a row, and after that we see what the time is.
Okay, and I'll actually answer your other question about the handsets, which I didn't try to avoid, I just forgot about it. So actually we are not blocked from the handset business anymore, because as you probably have heard, a Finnish company called HMD acquired Microsoft's handset business from Microsoft. And we originally did a deal with Microsoft where we licensed our brand to them, but we didn't give them the right to license it forward to another party. So actually, as Microsoft stopped doing this business, we were the kingmaker. We could choose who gets the right to continue that business. And then we did license our brand to this company, HMD, and indirectly we are back in the handset business. But we are also contributing quite a lot of technology and design knowledge to HMD so that the Nokia phones are really Nokia phones. And they are really good devices carrying the Nokia brand at the moment.
Hey, hello, my name is Taru Ervia. When I read your book, I felt almost physical pain when I thought about the pressure you went through all those years. So for all of us, I would like to ask your advice and your experience. How did you cope with the pressure, the immense pressure going after year after year?
You know, the most important thing when you're fighting a battle is what kind of people you have close to you. If your family is behind you, if your colleagues are behind you, if you can laugh with them, if you can cry with them, if you can speak honestly with them, then those external pressures are not that important. You feel supported and you want to support the people close to you. Of course, I had occasional moments where I felt pretty bad, and I described some of those moments in the book as well. But they were few and fairly far in between. At least that's my recollection now. And time heals all wounds, and knowing that, really believing in it, helps as well. Because you know that if I just keep on going, we'll do the best job we can, good things will happen. And it gives you strength.
Thank you very much. My name is Kingsley Ife, so I'm obviously leading the African Nordic Business Platform here in Finland. So I've been keenly following your activities over the years. So looking at the Finnish business ecosystem, I think from your presentation today also, affirm the understanding that dialogue is important, and then also it's also important to be curious for the things around you. And my understanding, working with some few of Finnish entrepreneurs here in Finland, has always been that the cultural aspect of Finns, doing things the way Finns do things, meaning that they are so focused and not paying attention to anything that is around them. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, when you think in terms of globalization and to some extent competitiveness and diversity, I still see that as a big problem, because it takes two to tango, and in order for Finnish businesses to be competitive globally, they need to also open up a bit, and something that doesn't look and something doesn't look foreign for them, instead of just operating on assumption rather than facts. So what's your own take, and what's your understanding and advice to Finnish entrepreneurs to make them more competitive in the global world? Thanks.
Well, I think it's a blessing for the Finnish society that we have more people from around the world living in Finland nowadays. When I started FSecure, the amount of foreigners in Finland was so much lower. But yet, even when FSecure was only a few years old and we had only some hundreds of employees, we had, I think, 18 different nationalities employed by the company, because we were working in a special field of cybersecurity, and Finland just didn't have people who had those capabilities and that expertise, so we had to recruit from around the world. And it was such a natural thing for me, based on that background, that I sort of forget where people come from. And they're just people. And often I get to discussions with, let's say, Finns. If we do, let's say, Nokia lays off people in Finland, and people come to me saying that, why do you do that in Finland? That's your home country. Why don't you lay off people in Germany or Belgium? I'm saying that actually they are just as human as you are. I spent a lot of time with them. I can't think of them as sort of easier people to lay off. They have families and kids and feel pain just like you do. So we need to, in case of layoffs, just try to do what's best for the company in the long term. But in terms of looking for cultural diversity, I strongly believe in that, and I have lived that all my professional life, to the extent that I it's hard for me to think of people as nationalities. And there are Finns who are completely international, and there are people from Zimbabwe who are only representing that culture. And there are Japanese people who are more American than most Americans, and you know, we are a wonderful bunch of different characters, and we shouldn't categorize and classify based on where you were born or what the color of your skin is or what your education is. We have on the Nokia team of executives, we have people from all over the world. And when we look for new people there, it's always a global search, without exception. And then we pick the best we can find.
Hi, my name is Topi, and I would like to talk about the phone under Nokia brand. I've been working as a salesman at a tech company for the past 2 years, and for a salesman, the Nokia phone is a very attractive phone to sell. But for the consumers, many people need to be convinced to choose the Nokia phone. The most common term is like, is Nokia still a thing, or is Nokia still good? So has that occurred maybe higher up in Nokia, and is there anything you are planning on maybe doing about it? Because Nokia is a good phone, what they sell today.
Yeah, there are 2 points of view there. One is that for the corporate Nokia, being involved in the phone business is also a way of us keeping the brand alive for consumers. So we can look at it purely from that selfish point of view. That as more people use Nokia phones, the more it's advertised, the more the press writes about it, the stronger and more valuable the Nokia brand will be. But then also, as we license our brand, we feel responsible for the brand being an asset for the licensee. So we need to do things that would strengthen that brand. And together with HMD, we are doing what we can. And as the device volumes grow, of course our resources to put more power behind the brand increase. And HMD has gotten up to a reasonable size in a fairly short time. During the first year, for example, the Nokia smartphones became number 3 in the UK market, which is a very, very competitive market. So in certain markets, the devices got off to a really good start. But of course, we would wish we could do more.
Hey, hello. Thank you for coming here today. I just had a quick question in regards to current events. Recently, the company Huawei has come into some controversy. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes. You know, I have tremendous respect for all our competitors. Huawei came from nowhere during the last 10 years and became technically the most advanced company in network infrastructure. And then they started with mobile devices, again came from nowhere and became one of the biggest manufacturers of mobile devices. And I have huge respect for that achievement. But we should focus on things that we can control, i.e. our own business, our own products, our customers. We shouldn't focus too much on the competitors. Of course, we need to understand them, but we shouldn't talk about them. And even less should we talk about geopolitics, though that's the job for the politicians, not for us. So obviously we follow very closely what is happening, but it's not our place to talk about it.
Hi Risto, thank you for such an amazing talk. And you see that I'm using Nokia, and because my iPhone simply doesn't work in the winter. So my question is regarding inclusion and diversity. Do you think it is missing in Finland, and what should be done to fix it? And the second short question, that if you were to start a company today, imagine you are in 20s And you know the world is going to change in the next 10 to 15 years. So why would you do that in Finland if you were born in China or in India?
You know, as I explained earlier, my sort of point of view to business and hiring people is a very special one. And I miss a lot of things that are happening in other companies. So I read these stories of a person from the Netherlands moving to Finland with a PhD in some technology area and who has been unemployed for 3 years because he can't get a job because he doesn't speak Finnish. And that's just incredible for me. I can't understand that because every single company that I work with uses English as the first language. And I don't understand how there can be companies in Finland that would need that type of special expertise and will not hire somebody because they don't speak Finnish. It's crazy. I believe that the good that could come from starting to speak English, even just because you hire that one person and because of that you start using English as the first language, that will help your competitiveness. It will help you expand your business outside Finland. It will help you be more open to ideas from elsewhere, and it will bring diversity. But some Finnish companies are a bit old-fashioned, maybe a bit introverted, and that's a bit of a mystery for me, because I don't know any such companies myself. So I know that they exist, and it's a pity. I don't like that.
Hey, thanks for the talk. I'm Tim Mallen, a student here, and I would like to ask, what life advice would you have for students or recent graduates? What are the most important things to learn?
I relatively recently, maybe during the last 10 years, came to the conclusion that there are 3 things that are important in my life. And to my utter shock, I found out that Alex Stubb has exactly those same 3 things that he lists are the central tenets in his life. And the first one is family, or you can extend that to people that are really important for you. And I have found out that I could define life almost as a journey to find good people, and then trying to keep those good people close to you. And those can be colleagues. In business life, when you find somebody who's really talented, has great values, you enjoy working with them, do anything you can to keep them close to you. Make sure that your company doesn't lose them, because they are so valuable and they are so rare. When you find a lawyer that you really trust and who is great at his or her work, make sure that you can work with that person throughout your life. When you find friends that are really good friends, do what you can to keep them close to you. And then, of course, your own family members. You can choose your wife, you can't choose your children. Make sure that you raise them well. The second thing is learning. I think it's really important to always have something that you are trying to learn, because it at least gives me a feeling of being on a journey. I'm moving forward. I'm excited about learning something new. And that's why I started programming again at this advanced age after a break of 30 years, and had so much fun getting to learn machine learning, which is an alien dimension, but so much fun. Or Chinese language, now that you can use Google Translator to translate a real-time discussion. but still it feels great to start learning a little bit oneself. Even if one could say that it's time wasted because machine learning will come and make it obsolete. And the third one is physical health. Making sure that you keep in shape and take good care of yourself. If I do those three in a balanced way, then I feel whole. I don't know if it will work for you. One of the key things in my book was that I listed a lot of things that we did and that I did and that I found to work for me. But I'm trying to say loud and clear that don't copy what I have done. Don't copy what Nokia did. Don't copy what our board does. But ask questions from yourself. Ask yourself whether the ways in which you work, which you maybe have inherited from the people who did your job before you, do those really make sense? What is your real duty? What is your real role? What are your real objectives? And based on those, what would be the best ways to accomplish them? And then break the rule book. Come up with new things, new ways. Experiment. Copy with pride if there's something in my book that you feel works for you. Copy with pride the 3 things that are important for me, but be ready to change them. But ask the questions.
Yes, sorry. So this will be the second to last question. So after this one, there is time for one more. So.
I cannot top that previous question. That would have been quite a good
I'm
way to go.
I'm very thankful that you're not even trying.
No, I'm not, honestly. Personal trick. So, hey Risto, my name is Jenny and I'm seeking for an advice. So I'm working within this Finnish corporation. We're operating internationally and the business is booming quite well at the moment. But within this traditional business, we have this new startup, me and a couple of my colleagues, and we are of course aiming towards changing the business environment we are working in and creating new ways of doing and seeing our business in general, because we need to go forward anyway. What would be your utmost first advice, considering the situation currently that we are booming and everything is going well?
And you feel that the company is not paying enough attention to what you do and what you could do. Okay, she said that the problem might be that there's just so much change happening that it might cause some issues for your internal startup. I think change is good. Change creates opportunities. It encourages people to change things further. I'm not quite sure if I understood the background, but in a company that is doing well, really well, the tendency is to focus, because you need to sort of take what you have started and works well as far as you can. And in those situations, an internal startup often gets starved because the tendency is to put more resources behind what seems to work so well. So if that's your situation, then the only way for you to be successful is to have the management really separate your team, put it in your own office in a different location, give you your own brand, separate you from some of the corporate processes. If you stay within that booming engine of growth and success, you'll be suffocated. It's highly likely. If the situation was something else, come to me after we finish and you can correct my misunderstanding.
Yeah. Hi, thank you of your time and wisdom. I'm Finn Power and I'm a Finnish film director, and I see that there is a huge potential for transformation of whole our society and life in the worldwide, but also especially in Finland, because we are a small country, and I think there's a lot to become what has happened to Nokia when it was big. Like I don't go to social and health transformation, but there's also positive things. And I don't know if there's somebody else in the room who studies film in Aalto University, but I used to study, and I was the only one in the film business. Oh, this is great! And change will take time, but creative things. And then my question is to you: what was the inspiring and most challenging when you were meeting these Chinese from China? And what Finland needs most? Which kind of change? What spirit we need? This my two questions.
Around the year 2000, Finland was at the top of the world. We were number 1 or number 2 in almost every single ranking, including the PISA results, which have now declined significantly, including the world's most powerful information society, where we are behind Estonia currently, etc., etc. We were number 1 in almost everything. And I think we got a sort of a national illusion, or we felt that if we freeze everything, we'll stay on top of the world forever. Because now things were so great in the year 2000 that let's just stop changing, we are perfect. And you know what happens when you stop changing. Others will just pass you from left and right. And that's exactly what happened. It was so difficult to change anything in Finland between the year 2000 and 2008. Maybe in 2015, we started becoming able to change, to contemplate change again. And I think Aalto University and the new university legislation in Finland is a good example of a domain where we were able to kickstart change again. So I'd say that the number one thing that we need as a nation is the understanding that we are not the best, and we are not our best. We don't need to be the world's best, but we should be the best Finland that we can be. And we are not the best Finland we could be. There's so much that could be done so much better in the country. And being open to new ideas, being open to new people from all around the world, being open to experiments. I think it's great, for example, that we have an experiment on basic income, but having one experiment on that is complete foolishness. It's like doing scenario planning with one scenario. It doesn't really give you any alternatives. It doesn't give you anything to choose from. If you have 5 experiments, then you'll actually feel happy when you can shut one of them down, because then you are increasing your focus. If you have only one experiment, it's the end of the world if you shut that one experiment down. Didn't work, you're left with nothing. If you do more experiments, actually it's a great thing to fail early, because you still have some others left that seem to be doing better. So we need to have more curiosity for experimentation and more courage to try out new things and figure out the sort of the fundamental issues and fixes. A good example of this attitude is, for example, a law that is in Bavaria in Germany, where they have for quite some time had legislation that dictates that any minister coming with a proposal for a new piece of law will at the same time have to propose the same number of paragraphs from an existing law that would be abolished, so that we are not increasing the amount of regulation we have. It's such a simple, fundamental thought that it changes the way people behave. And in a similar way, we need to think about what we want to accomplish and figure out simple, fundamental principles that will change the way we behave. And those can be found, but it requires courage, curiosity, and the ability to experiment.
Okay, this feels nearly criminal act to end after these thoughts, but it's time for the audiences to conclude and basically thank for 3 directions for yourselves. Then all those whose curiosity has led the latter part of this situation with your questions. And first and foremost, of course, to Risto for sharing his wisdom and also his thinking in responding to the questions that you have presented. But thank you, Risto, for being here.
Hey, thanks a lot.